This is the Baseball Fury podcast, hosted by Jimmy Flame.
You're tuned to the Big Game James Show on iHeartRadio. And now your host, Mr. Big Game James, Jimmy Flame.
What's up, everybody? This is your host, Jimmy Flame. For the Big Game James Show, the Baseball Fury. There's a lot going on in the world of baseball, and we're going to talk about all of it. Coming right up. Stay tuned. Many of you know, I do the Uber and Lyft thing on the side in DC and Baltimore on occasion. And just a few days ago, I had an interesting passenger who was returning from a trip from Tampa Bay where he'd gone to a Rays game and he sat right behind the umpire, basically. You know, when you're watching TV and you see the, 8 or 9 people or whatever in the background, he was one of them. And he told me something really interesting. We were talking baseball. Sometimes I'll begin a conversation in one of these trips with, yeah, you watch baseball or whatever. And, sometimes people are like, yeah, I do. And this guy was just straight up like, I work in baseball. He told me about his trip to Tampa, and I just found it interesting that he was sitting there, and he tells me, and there was a guy sitting next to him with a pen and a pad, and he said he noticed on his pullover sweater that there was a little St. Louis logo on it. So he just asked him, he's like, "Are you here scouting somebody?" And the guy looked at him and said, "Yeah." And he asked him who. And of course the guy chuckles and says, "Who do you think?" So with that little setup there, apparently the St. Louis Cardinals, according to this guy, are doing some serious scouting on Manny Machado right now. Now that might not be groundbreaking news or the explosive information you were looking for today, but I found it real interesting that this guy wasn't sitting up in the press box or in the scouting box. He was right down there on the field where anyone could see him, and anyone like such as this guy who I believe said he worked for the Washington Post. Sure if he was actually covering the game or if he was there for other business and just happened to go see an Orioles game in Tampa Bay. We didn't really get into that part. I tend to not probe too much when I speak to, when I'm talking to passengers. I don't want to come across as nosy or one of those creepy drivers that we've read about in the news before. I don't want to become part of the news. Creepy drivers began probing me for information on the Baltimore Orioles. I can see the headlines now. Anyhow, that's whatever that is. But this guy just happens to sit next to a scout for the St. Louis Cardinals who's there heavily scouting Machado, and we got into a conversation about whether the Cardinals are going to make a move for him this year or try to offer him one of those gigantic contracts, which is undoubtedly going to be worth $30 million a year over the period of 10 years next season. during Machado's actual free agency. There's no reason for Machado to sign now. He's got all the leverage in the world, by the way. But there's no denying that Machado will be a rental to somebody, whether it's the team he ends up signing for or helps another team get into the playoffs and beyond, possibly a World Series. I don't know. He's an impact player, that's for sure. He's got a decent glove and a majestic bat, as we all know. But we sort of decided, yeah, I was involved in this conversation too. It went both ways. That if he were to go to St. Louis, it's not a rental situation. And it's probably not going to happen this year. But St. Louis is more likely than not going to make a serious run in the Machado sweepstakes of next year. So, with that, I'll just let all my fellow St. Louis fans out there know you might be getting a really, really good ball player next year. And with that, today I decided to, because it's that time of the year, to talk about a handful of players who might not last on their current teams. They might not last past this weekend, possibly. We could see a fire sale as early as this weekend, though traditionally teams have waited until after the draft to begin their early trades on the season. And I believe that is this Monday. The draft is this Monday. So traditionally, teams have waited until after the I guess you call it mid-season draft, even though we're not quite mid-season yet. That's the All-Star break. And a full 2 months before the non-waiver trading deadline. But as of right now, about a third of the teams in baseball are just out of playoff contention. I know it's early to be talking about that. And speaking of Uber and Lyft rides, I had another conversation with a guy I'd picked up yesterday in Baltimore. We were talking about he was quite the optimist, put it that way. He's how I was about a month ago. He was asking about, hey, how the O's doing? And I said they are about as bad of a team. nothing against any of them personally. But in terms of their record, they're about as bad of a team as I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, for me, I'm comfortable saying they're out of it. They're out of contention. It's early, yeah, sure. But anyhow, this guy seemed to think that the O's could go on a 25-game winning streak and come, like the Oakland A's did years ago, and make this fiery comeback and get back into playoff contention, and everybody in the area is going to be real happy with the O's doing it again, right? No, no. I just kind of chuckled it off. Again, didn't bother to probe the guy, but. But with Friday quickly approaching, if you're listening to this on Friday, never mind that past line or that previous line I just made. But Major League Baseball might see a Black Friday sale unseen, unlike we've ever seen. There's really no need, aside from strategy, to wait until July 31st to begin these fire sales. There are quite a few teams out there waiting to unload their higher-priced talent in exchange for prospects, or to simply dump their payroll for the year, get them under the competitive balance tax threshold for next year. 9 franchises, and I just checked this information, the information this morning. 9 franchises are down in terms of attendance numbers by at least 100,000 from last year. This trade cycle is going to be a buyer's market. And once the amateur draft is over, it could start a free-for-all. And let's get right to it. And I'll just start with my beloved Orioles. They should get 3 pitching prospects for Manny Machado, at least. And I say prospects because the O's are not in contention, so it's not like they're unloading a value guy for a couple of other value guys that could collectively make up for the lost bat and the lost defense and the lost transcendent things such as ticket sales and all the things that have nothing to do with baseball on the field. But they should get at least a couple pitching prospects. It's not going to be, they're not all going to be top 10s. They should get at least one top 10. But they should get some solid arms from someone in exchange for Machado. Now, whoever that is, I don't know. I heard, the rumors around the Cubs being involved in some sort of deal to get Machado over to Chicago, including a trade that would include Addison Russell. That is something I can get behind. I really like Addison Russell. When I worked briefly in minor league ball down in New Orleans and was around all that good stuff, I got to see Addison Russell up close. I haven't seen him up close in Major League Baseball, but I got to see him up close when he was coming up and among one of his last games as a minor leaguer, and he had the swag on a field that was just big leagues, big league stuff. You just looked at the guy and could see that he was above and beyond like most of the other players on the field. Same thing with Chris Bryant. They were both in that game, those last games that I witnessed. Now back to attendance. Teams that could use that need something to happen in terms of attendance. The Toronto Blue Jays, whose attendance has plummeted to a MLB worst 321,000 or so from a year ago. Think about it. 321,000 less people have gone through the turnstiles in Toronto from last year. They're 11 games out of the Bo Sox in the AL East. They're going to dump their all-star third baseman Josh Donaldson and listen to virtually everyone but Vlad Guerrero Jr. They're hoping to move pitchers J.A. Happ, Tyler Clippard, and John Axford. Outfielder Curtis Granderson as well. If the price is right, they may listen to some teams on starters, Marcus Stroman and Aaron Sanchez too. Donaldson, who's earning $22 million, is a free agent after the year anyway. He struggled throwing the ball to first. Baseball executives predict the Blue Jays won't get nearly what they envisioned, but they're going to get something. They're going to save themselves some money in the process over the next few years, and they'll get something out of it. But in one of those informal surveys, there's little letters that go out to baseball executives. Most people, most of these executives are, in these surveys, are saying that Machado, on the other hand, is going to Cleveland, Philly, probably not Chicago, and there's those St. Louis Cardinals again. So the two biggest surprise teams, and I say this loosely, the two biggest surprise teams are expected to go different directions at the deadline. Now, the Phillies have been a surprise because they're right there in the thick of the NL East. Actually, if you go back a couple of episodes back, during the winter talks and all that stuff, where I declared that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to contend for the East this year, the NL East this year. But no, nobody listened to me. But you can go back and listen to it all you want. And I gave a good argument. I proffer a good argument as to why that has come to fruition. I won't go on about it today. But according to these executives and fans around the league, everyone but me and everyone in Philly seemed to think that the Phillies were going to tank again this year. No, it's not happening. They're right there with the Braves, right there with the Nats. The Braves are going to ride the tide, know what I mean? And no pun intended, their first 2 months have been quite peachy. But they're going to stay patient, and they're not going to mortgage their future. Oh, and for a friendly reminder how reluctant teams are to trade their prospects these days, both World Series teams from a year ago acquired ace pitchers only at the last minute. We're talking about the Dodgers' acquisition of Yu Darvish from the Texas Rangers, only when the Rangers reluctantly agreed to drop their asking price at the last minute. And the Stros, August 31 heist of Justin Verlander from the Detroit Tigers after every other team passed, and he cleared waivers. All Verlander did was help the Astros win the dang World Series and anchor today's finest rotation in baseball, and is the leading candidate to win his second Cy Young with, I believe his record is currently at 7-2 with a dutifully impressive 1.11 ERA. So for those GMs deathly afraid of trading prospects, you may want to remember the Astros when you start window shopping. And finally, time permitting, here's a quick look at 20 players that I believe will be on the block definitely within the next 2 months. And after Monday, you're going to start hearing a lot more about this. And some of these guys might even go on Friday, possibly being with a different team by this weekend. And, of course, I'm going to start with Manny Machado of the O's. Of course, he's a free agent. He's on pace to hit 50 home runs. He's playing good defense. At shortstop, that is. The Cubs have been a long-term, or not long-term, but a long-rumored destination. The Dodgers would definitely love to put him in Corey Seager's spot for at least the rest of the season as a rental. But the trouble is, unless Machado can suddenly learn how to pitch, the Cubs just don't have a natural fit. And the Dodgers, since Friedman's arrival, the vice president, has yet to trade any of his blue chip prospects since he's gotten to LA. Everyone's predicting Machado goes to the Phillies, who spent a cool $169 million during the winter on free agents Jake Arrieta and Carlos Santana, and they have plenty of cash despite that. They've got a ton of cash overhead. And for the remainder of the season, Machado's not really going to be that expensive. I think he's only making $17 million this year anyway. I say only because that's baseball dollars, which $17 million isn't a terrible amount of money. A terribly large sum anyway. It's a lot. Believe me, I could do a lot with $17 million. I'm pretty sure you could too. But also the other catch too is the Phillies, front office is comprised of a lot of former Orioles employees. And in terms of next year, they're likely going to be in a race with the Indians and the Cardinals. Again, back to that Uber ride. I really believe that the Cardinals are going to make a real serious run at Machado. But the Phillies have got to believe that Machado could help them make the postseason this year. So they might make a move now and to make him a handsome offer at the end of the season. And it would increase their odds of signing him when he does hit free agency, should they take him this year. Funny, just got something on my live chat. I'll get to you in a second there, bud. I'll be answering questions here in a minute, time permitting. I got to get through these players. And let's see here. Let's just move on to the next player. I've been talking a lot about Machado. You guys know how I feel about it. I know how you feel about it based on your questions and comments and whatnot. Here's a player I haven't talked much about. Josh Donaldson, Blue Jays. Even though I just mentioned him in the aforementioned spiel. The Blue Jays certainly don't have any intention to re-sign him. Not with Vlad Jr. around. The trouble is that his value has diminished even from just this winter, with all of his throwing woes and defensive mistakes. But you're still talking about one of the most dangerous hitters in the game, and he's an ultra, ultra, ultra competitor. The Cardinals love his bat and his attitude. He'd be a great fit there and arguably a perfect destination for the future. Cole Hamels of the Rangers. He's a starting pitcher, in case you didn't know. They're not going, the Rangers are not going to pick up a $20 million option in 2019, which includes a $6 million buyout, and would love to dump as much of his $23 million salary ASAP. He is a 4-time All-Star and a 2008 World Series MVP. He's just 3-5 with a 3.74 ERA this season. But you can't deny his postseason pedigree, and that would be ideal for any current contender, particularly any National League contender. And with that, the Brewers, them Milwaukee folks, despite being on Hamels' no-trade list, might be in the sweepstakes. Because for a chance to return to the playoff, Hamels might just waive it. In fact, I would think that he'd waive it in a heartbeat. He goes to the Brewers. Kelvin Herrera. He's a closer with the Royals. Arguably the best closer, sure to be available with a high stock value. 11 saves thus far, at least last I checked. He might have 12 now. 0 walks in about 20 innings. He goes to Cleveland. That's what I'm thinking. Cleveland desperately needs bullpen help, especially with a struggling Andrew Miller. He's on the DL with knee inflammation. Well, Cleveland, it's time to strike again. Kelvin Herrera is your guy. Chris Archer, Tampa Bay Rays. He's a starting pitcher, rather. Let's add some drama to this. The Rays certainly don't have to trade Archer and can patiently wait for someone to meet their price tag. Besides, they want to wait until his performance improves. Anyway, he's got a pedestrian 3-3 record with a 4.58 ERA so far this year, yielding a whopping more than a hit an inning and walks. He puts a guy on base like every inning. But he might end up on the Cubs anyway, who dropped $164 million in the free agent market. That's funny. Market on Yu Darvish and Tyler Chatwood, only to watch Darvish go on the DL more times than in games he's won. And Chatwood led the league in walks. They finally bring him home after trading their prodigal son 7 years ago in a package headlined by catching prospect Victor Caratini. Get used to that, Cubs. Francisco Liriano, Tigers, another starting pitcher. Everyone seems to be asking the Tigers for Michael Fulmer. Sorry, he's the 24. He's actually 25. He's a 25-year-old guy you want to build a rotation around and not trade away. The Tigers instead are telling teams that Liriano, who's 34, is readily available. And he can certainly provide depth, which would be invaluable for a contender, with a 3-2, 3.90 ERA mark. I believe he's going to the Yankees. If they expect to hang around with the red hot Red Sox, they could use a guy like this. Back to the O's. Zach Britton, who is on assignment right now. I believe he's on assignment with the Frederick Keys. The only reason I know is because I follow the Frederick Keys on Twitter, and they sent me some message about, come see Zach Britton on his way back to the major leagues. But he's rehabbing an Achilles tendon, a ruptured Achilles tendon. He should be back in the bigs in about 2 weeks. And some are saying gone in 2 months. Probably quicker. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the Astros. I really wouldn't. Britton could be their man. Now, who the O's get in return for him? The Houston Astros are just loaded with AAA and AA talent and prospects. I'm not sure exactly who, but Houston could use a Zach Britton. And that's where he goes. Daddy. Mike Moustakas, whom I thought would land on the Orioles this year, did not. He's with the Kansas City Royals at third base. He sort of shrugged off that cold winter market. You know, the one where no deals were being made this year. He hit 38 dingers last year, and he's sitting on 11 right now. And the prediction is that if the Cleveland Indians move their all-star Jose Ramirez to second, then it might open up a spot for Moustakas. Cleveland's also in the running for the Machado sweepstakes, or in the Machado sweepstakes. So it could come down to these two guys vying for a spot at third. Who gives them the better deal? Who gives them the best chance versus its cost effectiveness to have in order to get back to the playoffs, possibly World Series? There you go. And the aforementioned J.A. Happ, starting pitcher. He's 7-3 with a 3.84 ERA. There's another question. I'm trying to get to him, y'all. I got to get through this. The M's might grab him. Mariners, being so desperate to end a long postseason drought. The GM, Jerry Dipoto, is on his final year of his contract. I'm sure he wants to at least try to go out with a bang. However, a postseason return could assure him being back, and J.A. Happ could certainly help that cause out there in Seattle. Another O's pitcher, Brad Brock. He's a reliever. Pretty sure he doesn't have a future here in Baltimore. He's so up and down, it's insane. It's like I want to stab myself in the eye with a giant coffee cup. Sometimes when this man takes the mound, he just hair pulling. He's a decent setup man if he can get it together. 26 saves in the past 2 seasons. The Los Angeles Angels could certainly use a Brad Brock. if they want to save money in terms of starting pitching, why not bolster their bullpen with a guy like this? That's where he's probably going. I'm going to skip over a few. I keep talking pitchers. And here's the one that just has me just like, no, in tears. Adam Jones. Yes, you're going to hear some things about Adam Jones. I hope to, that he doesn't leave the Orioles. Center fielder. He was brought to the O's by from the Mariners. A decade ago, a little over a decade ago. And that was the trade that pretty much sent the Mariners spiraling in the first place, and then the Orioles suddenly got pretty good enough for playoff contention and playoffs and blah, blah, blah. It included Chris Tillman. The M's haven't quite recovered, and the Orioles have been getting the daylights beat out of them the last 2 seasons. We love Jones. He's the face of the franchise, but he's a free agent in November. And the rumor is, and this isn't a bad one. This one might actually happen. The rumor is the M's, since losing Robinson Cano to a PED suspension, and center fielder D. Gordon out with a broken toe, are going to make an attempt to right a wrong and bring Jones back to Seattle. I don't want to see it happen, but I'm okay with that. At least it's not the Yankees, right? Unless you're a Yankees fan. At least. Jed Lowry, Oakland Athletics second baseman. This is the type of player every contender values, and his versatility and clubhouse leadership. He's hitting around 300 with an 867 OPS and hitting in the middle of that potent Athletics order. The Red Sox might make a move for him. The Yankees might make a move for him. Those two teams again. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jed Lowry right there in the middle of the race for the AL East, either with the Red Sox or the Yankees. Either team's perfect for him. See, I can't even say perfect because I don't like saying that when it comes to the Red Sox and the Yankees. Let's go back to a pitcher. How about Brad Hand? He's a closer for the Padres. The baseball world was stunned a year ago when the Padres didn't trade their most coveted commodity. Well, everyone but me. And 1 year later, though not being quite as electric, he's under control through 2021. Earning just $3.5 million this year. This guy could be a deal. The Padres are expected to keep him, but if anyone can tempt him, it's going to be the Dodgers and their rich farm system. And his price tag. Again, $3.5 million. Look, talking about cost effectiveness. We're talking about a cost effective pitcher. We're talking about the Dodgers might just do it. And in terms of catchers, Jonathan Lucroy, of course, the Oakland A's catcher. The A's are sticking around in that race out there in the West. Definitely wild card. But the likelihood of them sticking around in it by, say, July are about as slim as landing Bryce Harper next winter. So, the Milwaukee Brewers are going to make a move for him. Why not? He's a homegrown catcher from the Brewers. Why not bring him back? They could use a guy like that anyway to help further secure their dominance. Starlin Castro of the Miami Marlins. Y'all remember the fire sale that Derek Jeter performed or initiated over the winter. Well, he's been a total Starlin Castro has remained an absolute professional in his time in Marlins purgatory. Hitting around 285, 701 OPS. But he'd probably like to get out of there about as much as the Marlins want to get him out. About as much as the Marlins want to get everybody out, it seems. If the Marlins trade their catcher, their prize catcher, JT Realmuto, they will likely ask teams to assume Castro and his contract as well. The Nats, the Washington Nationals, could be tempted if the second baseman Daniel Murphy isn't the same all-star player upon his return. You might see those guys in Washington. You just might see it, folks. You just might see it. Now, I'm not quite sure if that was all 20 players I wanted to cover, but that was a bunch of them. You get the gist. There's a lot of great talent, a lot of elite talent out there that's going to start moving as early as this weekend. Definitely after Monday, you're going to start hearing more serious talks underway. Especially, obviously by contenders out there. Again, a third of the teams are out of it. They're going to start moving their players. I don't expect this trade session, particularly, to be as slow as the winter free agency, the off-season free agency of last year, or of this year / last year. I don't expect it to be that slow. There's too much on the line for too many teams and too many good deals out there. For at least rental players. When did I start referring to these guys as rental players? I think I read it somewhere. I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. A rental. But as usual, you can get a hold of me over there on Facebook at JimmyFlame77, on Twitter at JimmyFlame77. Keep those questions coming in. I will get to them eventually. I apologize. I'm running out of time today. I got to get going. Not going to get to it today, but until next time, this is Jimmy Flame Daddy talking baseball. Don't forget, on the future episode, I will be doing a fun episode on professional wrestlers that might make good ball players, and comprising an entire team around that whole sentiment for these wrestlers and baseball players. It's going to be a fun show. It's coming up. I'm still doing the research on it and yada, yada, yada. I'm taking way too much time on it to get it out, but there's more important things to talk about right now, like the trades and this season, and what can be done about Major League Baseball's attendance woes. I guess as a whole, there really aren't any attendance woes, but there's 9 teams right now that are over 100,000 less from where they were last year. And I don't know, maybe the answer is just put better teams on the field. Put better teams on the field. But until next time, I'm going to get the you-know-what out of here. You've been listening to the Big Game James Show, the Baseball Fury. I'm Jimmy Flame. Wrapping up another show. Be sure to stay tuned in to iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and everywhere else, every other major digital distributor. We can find podcasts and radio shows. If you can help me out, let your friends know about the Big Game James Show. Have them subscribe too. Our list is growing daily. And how could I fail to mention that we're also on Spreaker? But until next time, I'm going to get out of here. Jimmy Flame signing off. Ow! See you later.